This week on Buffering, we are looking at the top 10 outdated plays that are still haunting BSPs. And Gabe, this is actually a conversation we started on last week's episode, which was recorded yesterday, which is just throwing me off. But we started this on last week's episode as kind of a joke of, well, we totally have to do an episode on this. And here we are. We brought in David Letterman. He was busy, so we couldn't make this episode. Also not in the budget, but we have compiled a list of 10 outdated plays that, like I mentioned, that are still haunting BSPs to really ask the question, you know, if you, as we go through this list, are you still living in 2005? Which, by the way, was 20 years ago.
Wow, that's wild. That's wild to think about that was 20 years ago. But yeah, I'm so excited about this topic, Zach. We mentioned it just sort of in passing in the previous episode, and we both kind of went, oh my gosh, we have to do an episode on this. And here we are a day later, and we're recording the episode already. Like, we got so jacked up about this. You started texting me last night with a bunch of ideas. I loved it. And so, man, I am just excited to get into this. We are just going to be fired up as we go through each one of these, and hopefully not make anybody mad, but we may make some people mad. I don't know, man. We'll try and be kind.
I thought about that, Gabe. I thought about that. I said, if this episode upsets anyone, I think there's more questions to be asked. But
well, yeah, it's a great point. If we end up upsetting you, it's probably because you're still doing one of these practices that are a bit outdated, and it probably is time to look at things from a fresh perspective. So I'm excited again, man. I'm just really excited for this episode. I think it's going to be super fun. I say we do have a list of 10 here, Zach. So I think we just got to jump into it straight away and start working our way through this list, my friend.
I agree. So number one, I didn't actually rank these, Gabe, so I don't know if we need to like hop around a little bit, but this one is like number one for me because of previous experiences. But number one on outdated practices, all-day service appointments. We will be there between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. This drives me insane. And I say this as someone who has fallen into this trap of, we will be there from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And then later that day, oh, just kidding, it's going to be tomorrow from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. now. Great. I just wasted 2 days. You as the company, you're commandeering my day as the customer, ruining it. And I think the other way to look at this, Gabe, that's not so much of a rant now, but we are in what I'm going to call the era of Uber style tracking. When you need an Uber, you get that live activity on your iPhone, you get an exact pickup time. Outside of Uber, even when you buy something online, you get that delivery window. It even tells you now, between 2 and 5 p.m. on UPS or FedEx, things like that. So it just makes these long install windows feel archaic. And like I said, we are in this era of real-time information. Consumers expect tighter scheduling, real-time updates, and not this 8-hour mystery.
Yeah, exactly. And to extend that Uber example even further, I just had to order an Uber to take me to the airport today. And I scheduled it yesterday to make sure that it was at my house at a specific time. So you're spot on, Zach, that, as we've been trained to see things like Uber and, see it coming to whatever our location is and being able to track it live on our phone. But even more so, I want to choose when it's coming to my house and when I'm engaging with that. So putting that power in your customer's hands makes it even more exciting for the consumer.
Scheduling Ubers kills me because in Salt Lake, I scheduled one to take me to the airport one day because I had an early flight. So I scheduled it for like 4 a.m. The flight left at 5 a.m. Yep. I figured that'd be perfect timing. It was like 3:20 and I get a notification saying my Uber's on my way. And I'm like, great, I'm going to show up at the airport so early now. But that's my
but that's a you problem. That's not an Uber problem because you're right.
I don't know
I've had that exact same situation happen where I was traveling and I had a crazy early flight. And so I needed to get like the 4 or 4:30 a.m. Uber. And they will wait for you until your scheduled time and even a little bit after. So that's a you wanting to like not make the person sit out there and wait problem, not a Uber problem per se. So they will stay there until the allotted time and even a little bit after. So you do not have to feel like you need to leave early
That's actually really good to know. However, I'm still going to blame the company because why? I mean, 40 minutes early. But
Yeah,
the
that
next
is
one here,
quite a bit
Gabe.
early.
Number two, long-term contracts and termination fees. And I feel like we need some like fanfare music as we go through this. But long-term contracts, this is one that we actually just talked about a little bit, Gabe. And it's going to kind of expand into my number three here. But the 1 to 2 year contracts, cancellation penalties, this lock-in approach of great, we have you as a customer. Well, now you can't leave for the next 24 months. And modern consumers don't like being trapped by restrictive contracts.
Yes, agreed. And you're right. It leads nicely into the next one also. So I don't want to step on that too much, but you're spot on. And this is a tactic that was used forever, primarily in the cable space with the large providers to lock people in to specific, contract windows. And I get it. This is a high cost of acquisition industry that we work in. We want to make sure that there's a relative quote unquote guarantee of revenue coming back for some period of time. You know what else is a really good way to guarantee recurring revenue, Zach?
I could think of a couple.
Providing a wonderful experience to your customers. And
That was my number one, customer experience.
it's like think about all of the effort that went into creating a contract, the legal conversations, the manager conversations, all of this back and forth, the process of putting that all in place. Wouldn't it have been better just to spend that time and effort on creating a wonderful customer experience, which means that your customers aren't going to want to leave and you don't have to make them feel like they're trapped in a contract that you force them to sign?
100%. Which takes us to number three, hidden fees and surprise charges. This is ironically something, Gabe, that I just texted you about this morning. I told you I went and got my mail for the first time in like 4 months. And And the only thing in my mailbox, which is just comical at this point, I talk about it all the time, is just this national provider with their latest broadband offer, right? And this one was 50% off for 2 years. And then you get into the fine print and it says, well, you must lease a modem. That modem must be the additional 1 gig modem. You must subscribe to advanced Wi Fi. You'll have additional installation charge, all this like fine print, but people want that low monthly price without the maze of extra fees, the transparent and the all in pricing. And over the past few years, with things like the broadband nutrition labels, which drive me crazy to an extent for other reasons, they have had this positive impact of having that transparent information. You can quickly go to any BSP's website, see the associated speeds and fees associated and with that. But to be continued where that goes.
Yeah, I have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with the broadband nutrition labels also. I always like them because they make competitive research way, way easier. So from that perspective, I personally am a huge fan.
The
I
UI
still
UX
think
designer of me is what hates them. Like
there you
there's
go. Exactly. The UI is atrocious. And unfortunately, I was just looking at a provider's website yesterday, and I can't remember who it was. It doesn't really matter. But they had I think they were offering 4 service tiers, and they had the service tier, like brief description, and then there was the full nutrition label on the page right after that. So in order to see the other 2 options, you had to scroll through the entire nutrition label in order to see that there were even 2 other options of service, which of course those 2 at the bottom were the highest priced options. Excuse me. So we're probably the ones that the provider would have wanted the customer to buy. But I'm like, like it hurt my soul because I went, nobody is nobody is going to scroll down and actually look at this stuff. But to your point, that transparent part of this is what's so important. And consumers don't like to feel like they're being tricked. And you're seeing more and more providers move away from this type of model. And to me, this is a huge positive. And if you are offering aggressive promotional pricing to get people in the door, I get it. Like, I'm sure that your management team is all over you for, bringing subscribers in the door. You've got metrics that you need to hit. I understand. But in my view, it's destroying long-term value that you would be building with your customers by bringing them in at a cheap price, because you've already set the context for them at that point of what your service is. It's cheap, it's inexpensive, and yes, that price is going to go up later, but it makes it harder for them to stay when they have that perception that it's inexpensive from the jump.
I know you love that one, Gabe. But the next one here is number 4 on the list, and phone only support. I I was thinking about this, and I can't tell you the last time I called a company or had a phone call in general. But if I go to your website and I see a live chat button or I see call or text us, I'll text you first. Lets me go about my day. And, don't have to call anyone. But I feel like this goes back to the point I made a couple episodes ago of when can we stop calling cell phones phones, right? At what point is this no longer a phone? And at the end of the day, it's I don't wanna navigate hold music. I don't wanna navigate menus. The tech savvy customers such as myself, such as Gabe, I presume, we love the self-service apps, the live chat, even social media. Brands cannot hide on social media, so it's a great place to interact with people.
Hmm.
The other thing here, I mentioned the hold music, coming out here in a couple of weeks with iOS 26, and I've been testing this, and it's just fascinating. But when you do get put on hold, um, I don't wanna say it's Siri doing this, but something in the phone is, going to kind of let you go about your day and then notify you when you're off hold. So that's
Oh,
just a
that's pretty cool.
cool
That's a cool
side note
feature.
on a customer experience. But yeah, I just the hold music is terrible. Plus, this is actually another complaint about Apple. But in high school, I worked, at a school district, and you'd often have to call a, kind of a special line within Apple for their education services.
Mm.
And at the time, I don't know if they still do this, but they would play like actual songs on the phone. And it was so bad because you get like the 1920s like audio quality, but it's a song now. So every time I'm on hold, that's
Uh,
all I can think of. It's just the PTSD there. But long story long, don't put me on hold. Just let me text you, chat you on your website. I mentioned the experience I had a couple weeks ago with my air conditioning company,
yes, I was
right?
thinking about
That
that
was a
story.
phenomenal customer experience. And at the end of the day, there was nothing special about that touch point. It was me reaching out for support. But again, the entire experience from this company made it into this very positive story.
Hmm. Exactly. And it gets back to something we talk about a lot, Zach, which is letting people approach you the way that they want to, also communicating with people in the way that they want to be communicated with. But just because you don't, just because you as the broadband service provider don't perceive, a particular thing as white glove doesn't mean that your subscribers don't perceive it that way. And I know this is something that we talk about a lot, but I think it's a really important point to make sure that, again, you're thinking about the way that the customer is going to perceive it, not the way that the internal employees are going to perceive it.
Exactly. Which takes us right into number 5 here. Your new customer deals that forget your loyal customers. Gabe, this is something I feel like we've talked about quite a bit. And I hear this a lot from BSPs of, oh, we want to do this new nice offer, but we don't want our existing customers to be mad. And this is something, even my BSP has done is, they had this new customer offer for me back in the day, back in my prime. And now, my price has since, quietly gone up, whereas they're still running these offers that's like $20 less than what I pay, or whatever. The other one, Gabe, we also talk about is it's very common for your internet bill to double at the end of that first year promo. We've seen a lot of big players in the market do this as well, where you can like bundle different things, and then suddenly, your end of promotion period bill goes from 80 to $120.
Yeah.
These are very common. And of course, we're pulling that in from the broadband label, which thank you, broadband nutrition labels. But it's uh it's tough. It's you don't want to again make or upset your existing customers, but you still do want to attract your new prospects.
Yep, exactly. And what's been interesting, one of the things I've noticed with a lot of companies who do exactly what you're talking about, where there's this huge increase in the bill after some period of time, is the lower priced tiers have an even larger percentage increase. So let's say you have 3 tiers, 100 meg, a gig, and 2 gigs or whatever, just making stuff up here. And the 100 meg tier is $50. Oftentimes, what I've seen is that price will go from like 50 to $100. And the 1 gig tier that may promotional price may have been $80 or $90, it's going to go to 110 or 120. So the percentage increase on the smaller tiers is even more dramatic because, again, they're trying to get people in at that low price point. But guess what you've done when you do that? Now, again, going back to our previous discussion, you are now the quote unquote cheap provider. I would love for somebody to do a long-term study, Zach, of like what the impact of customer lifetime value is for, it's like, it would be like a gigantic A/B test. A provider who does super aggressive discount pricing and what that means from a churn perspective. And B, a provider that is much more transparent about their pricing and doesn't have those huge increases and what that does for their customer lifetime value and what that does for churn. I can tell you anecdotally that, I've seen a lot of those situations. It's not a perfect A/B test, but that generally company B in that scenario is going to drive a heck of a lot more value creation versus value destruction and long-term customer lifetime value. But gosh, it would be fascinating to see like an actual study around that.
I hate to say it, but I know what Gabe is doing next week.
I'm gonna have to figure out some way to do that. It again, it's been such a tried and true method forever in this industry. And to go back to the beginning of this conversation, Zach, just because we've been doing something one way forever doesn't mean that we should continue to do it. If it's not creating value for our business, and if the needs of our customers have changed, then we need to think about how the products and solutions and packaging that we're putting in front of our customers needs to change as well.
And the key thing here, the needs of our customers, because that's going to be what really the remaining items on this list focus on is the
Yes.
evolving needs. I mentioned earlier in the podcast, oh, it's not 2005 anymore. That was 20 years ago. Great. How has your business changed over the past 20 years? How have consumer needs changed over the past 20 years? Which is going to lead us into number 6, which is one-way marketing. Also, I've heard this called 100 different things: spray and pray, carpet bombing. But
I feel like I say carpet bombing all the time, but spray and pray is probably more commonly used.
I don't know what the correct term is, but we have so much data at our fingertips now that we don't have to do this, right? So, and what I say by the carpet bombing is you take your generic mailer, your bill insert. That's the big one I hear. Oh, we got to get this as a bill insert. Great, there it is. The repetitive ads. No one is listening to this, or maybe the one person who opens their bill is listening to this and reads that message. But 2025, we have consumers now that value interaction, authenticity, and you need the dialogue and the personalization to match that, not this old-fashioned broadcast advertising that talks about, or talks at the customer, I should say,
Mm-hmm.
and doesn't engage the customer. I told the story about the big name BSP that always mails me stuff. It's the only person who mails me. I should maybe put my podcast or my address in those podcast notes for fan mail. But yeah, the only person who sends me mail is this BSP, and it's always the same message. They don't know anything about me, or maybe they do. They just don't know how to use the data. And they've yet to create an offer that's personalized. It's the same message, Gabe, that I would imagine if they were in your service area that you would get.
100%.
My neighbors across town, different neighborhood, different town, everyone's getting the same message. I've Googled it, I've looked it up, I've seen these postcards. I have one in my mailbox. It's nothing but noise.
Yeah. Yeah. Noise is a great word for it. And it's, again, I think this is a situation where because it's quote unquote working, because subscriber growth is going up for many of these companies, although ironically for some of the large companies, it's been going down. But because they can point to it and say like, well, we are actually bringing in customers via this method, they just keep doing it, even though it's wildly expensive and inefficient. This is something that I've seen or I've heard come up in conversations with broadband service providers. It's like they know that this type of mass marketing to everybody in a particular area that they can serve isn't necessarily the best way to do it, but they struggle with, okay, how can I actually shift this? How do I take this back to my leadership team? And you hit on it, Zach. We have the tools to make this easier and better now. You can send a personalized message to specific groups of people. It doesn't have to be the same message across the entire market that you serve. So this is I guess I don't know. I feel like I'm like challenging the listeners to the podcast to go do something different. But this is one where I really, really would encourage you to, okay, how much am I investing in these generic approaches? And what if I were to take those dollars and put it into a more targeted approach, into a more thoughtful approach, into a more personalized approach? What would that actually look like? And if you want to have the
And
conversation, reach out to Zach and I. We are happy to chat about this anytime. But
happy,
it's
I feel
just
like
like,
we're more excited to chat
oh,
about this kind of
100%. But
thing.
it's like we've got to make that leap of faith. You know, you've got to make a little bit of that leap of faith to understand that there's a better way. And again, just because we've been doing something the same way forever doesn't mean we should continue to do it that way.
But we've always done it this way. That's the I just
Oh,
that
oh,
phrase. I don't know if it's like a generational thing or if it's just I've said it on the podcast before. I'm a do it yesterday person, but that phrase, nothing upsets me more. So as we kind of go into number 7 here,
yeah.
this one's interesting because there's a lot that can be done when someone calls in, but the support call sales pitch, consumers want empathy and a solution. They don't want a scripted key focus on scripted sale. If they call in and they're frustrated and you come right at them with, oh, you need to buy this, that's not going to help your case. Now, if they call in with a problem and you do in fact have a solution, that's kind of a different conversation there. But when you have this already frustrated customer, the last thing you want to do is pull out your script and read that off to them.
Yep. Yeah, there's legitimate times when you will want to cross-sell or upsell something to somebody because
Especially
it
when you
will
have data that supports it.
there you go, right? So use this as a data-driven approach. I think a managed Wi-Fi extender is a perfect example here. So the vast majority of calls that come into a call center are my Wi-Fi isn't working. Okay, well, there's lots of reasons that that could be. It may be that there's interference. It may be that there's coverage problems. It may be that the customer has old devices that just can't handle the speeds that you're actually selling to them. There's a myriad of things that can happen there, but most of the time it's coverage issues. Now, the scripted part that you said there, Zach, is so important. It can't be a scripted conversation. You have to ask the customer some questions and genuinely listen to the answers. And if you're genuinely listening to those answers, then it could be that you can, subtly move that to a sales conversation to say, look, you've just told me that your your TV that's in your basement, which is really far away from your router, is the one that's having connectivity problems. you know that's a coverage problem. The great news is we have a very inexpensive way for you to solve that. For $5 more a month, I can send you out a mesh unit. You can plug it in yourself. We don't even have to send a technician, and it's going to get you all the coverage that you need in that area of the house. Now you're playing back what the customer has told you in that make-believe scenario because you were actually listening to them, not just going through the script of, okay, if customer says this, then I say this. And it does take empathy and listening, but that's what sales is all about, man. It's about listening to people and actually, really coming up with a solution that makes sense for them.
You know what like this reminds me of one of my favorite TV shows, of course, Gabe, Severance. And like it was in episode 1 when they have the giant binder where it's like, if person says this,
Oh
turn to
my
this
gosh.
page, or if
Yes.
person has this offering, turn to this page. That's what I think about. There's nothing personal about that conversation. You're reading the script, you don't understand the data or the experience that's happening in that person's home, but that's all I can think about there.
That's a great example. I forgot about that. I haven't, it's been a while since I watched that show, but gosh, that was a really high quality program.
It's one of my top 5 favorite shows. So
It was a good show.
can't wait for season 3 in the next 5 years. But
Yeah, we might be waiting a while.
oh my goodness. Number 8, outdated hardware on your users. This one drives me insane because we've seen scenarios where, for different reasons, the router or the deployed system in a subscriber's home came out 10 years ago and they've been renting it ever since. But again, think about 10 years ago, Gabe, 2015. Can you believe that? 10 years ago was 2015.
I can't.
Back in
Wild.
back in my day. Was the Apple Watch even out yet? I don't even know if that was out yet. Or like the VR headset was just like it was like a dev kit at the time. Like
Mm-hmm.
we didn't have the latest and greatest technologies. I don't want my Wi-Fi system to be, on the same product level as an iPhone 5S or an iPhone 6, so much has changed since this time. That classic cable box, technology demands so much more.
The cable box example, I think, is a perfect one, because that's one that, in the traditional cable days, people would put those cable boxes out there and then they would just stay there forever. And the provider would be charging $5 or $10 a month for that box. And after probably a year or 18 months, it was literally just pure profit for them. So they're just making money hand over fist. But the experience for the customer is not great because they have antiquated technology in their home. So again, Zach, this is a great one. I know you've done projects like this in the past. Look at the data, look at those customers who may be not having the best experience, and reach out to them proactively to upgrade. Oftentimes they'll be willing to pay more for that. Or even if you don't want to charge them extra, just get them into something that's actually going to be a good experience. One of the things that always surprised me is there's a large national provider that charges their customers $25 per month for their advanced Wi-Fi, quote unquote, service. And one of the features of that service is that every 3 years, you get to upgrade your Wi-Fi system. So for $25 a month, you get the privilege of upgrading after 3 years. That's a lot of money that they're making off of those subscribers. Again, I mean, do the rough math. The thing's probably $150. After 6 months, they've paid it back. And then 2.5 years is pure profit until the next time when they have to send out a new system.
Yeah, I was doing the math in my head and I was like, I'm in the wrong business.
Seriously.
It makes me laugh. It makes me laugh too, because as a consumer this week, I plugged in I'm going to call it an old iMac that I want to spin up as just a server, just, anything. And I got a notification from Command IQ that said, this like the Wi-Fi experience could be degraded. This is an old, an old device connected.
Like,
and I
you
thought,
ain't kidding, buddy.
I know, even my latest and greatest, Wi-Fi system that I have can identify that I'm going to have a bad experience with bad equipment in the home. So number 9, we're almost to the end of the list here. This one, we could do a whole episode on data caps and just additional fees on this. So
yes.
I think it's very common, Gabe. We'll see, within the broadband labels, of course, data caps around 1 terabyte, sometimes less, sometimes more. I feel like this practice it started before my time, started before streaming, gaming, work from home, and all these different usage intensive applications. And here we are in 2025. We have these always connected lifestyles. And then we have this suddenly artificial limit and these throttles that don't align with that. And at the end of the day, your customers are going to see this as need this penny pinching. Let's call it for what it is. Home internet is essential. Households don't want to worry about counting their gigabytes. I, of course, through my own, geekiness here, I'll track how much data usage I've used over time. And I can tell you when I was in college versus when I work from home, it's increased significantly. My lifestyle has changed. I can't imagine having to, put that cap on my connection.
The other piece of this, you mentioned lifestyle changes, but the technology changes too. So what we see is that usage goes up every single quarter, every single year. And it is because we're buying more technology. There, technology advances. We're getting things like the VR headset and those sorts of things that are more bandwidth intensive. But the biggest piece of this is streaming. People generally don't understand how this works, and what the platforms do, the Netflixes and the Amazon Primes and the Hulus and all of these, they look to see what your service tier is, and then they cram whatever quality video feed they can into that service. So if you've got a 50 meg service versus a 500 meg service, you're going to be getting a much lower quality stream from Netflix or Amazon or whoever on the 50 meg service than the 500 meg service. Well, on the 500 meg service, you might be getting a 4K or an 8K stream if you have the capability to do that. That means that streaming usage increases dramatically because the quality of the stream is so much better. Do you think that any normal consumer, understands that? There's no way.
And we didn't even talk about cloud gaming and the impact there. Also, the last thing I want to say, Gabe, is have you ever looked to see, and this is like the most 2025 thing I'll say today, have you ever looked to see how much data your car uploads every night?
Oh my gosh, I never even thought about that. I have not looked to see how much consumption the Tesla is doing, whether it be upload or download. Like
You should look
I
at
get
the
software updates all the time, and I run those in the middle of the night. But I've never thought about looking to see how much consumption is driven there.
do something for me and look at the upload sometime. And of course, in 10 years ago, 15 years ago, this probably wasn't something people were thinking about. A
Correct.
couple, let's think about the smart glasses, the AI sunglasses. That's probably not a connected device that people would have seen years ago as well. And here I am pulling video and photo off my sunglasses. But Gabe, the usage intensive applications are here. The data caps. I don't want to think about it. Also, I will say, at what point do you not just say you have unlimited data? If you have a 2 terabyte data cap,
Well, yeah,
like
what's the point? Like, what percentage of people are going to use more than 2 terabytes? It's a small percentage. So,
and
yeah,
I
agreed.
have to look now and see what my total data usage has grown to again with the lifestyle changes. But last thing we'll talk
Yeah.
about here
Whew,
is
man, we got to number 10. We did it, buddy.
I don't know. I feel like we'll be number 20 here if we keep going. But let's talk about bundling a little bit. And this could be a sensitive subject here, but bundling services that specifically nobody wants anymore. And I think about the old providers who love bundling cable TV, home phone, and internet all into this triple play that made sense in 2005. But now we're at odds with consumer habits. And I mentioned like the home phone, the landline phone. I had to pull some data on this, and I want to make sure I get this right. But it's estimated, and I think this was about a year or so old, but 28% of households have a landline phone compared to 10 years ago, not even 10 years ago, 80% in 2000. Okay, sorry, I did my math wrong. 80% in 2008, 28% in 2025 or so. So a significant decrease in
Massive
that, number
decrease.
one. But
Yep.
like, let's look at it in other terms here. That means 7 out of 10 households are using a wireless phone only. I'm one of these. I will never have a landline phone. I will never have cable TV. Again, I'm not everyone's target audience here, but this is more common than I think people think. The modern customer would rather kind of pick the services that fit their lifestyle, whether that's streaming TV and internet or whatever that may be, instead of being forced into a bundle of legacy products. I see this even with my BSP. They have a TV offering and it gives you like the channels that come with it, right? I look at the channels that come with this offering and I'm like, when am I ever going to watch this specific news service, or when am I ever going to watch, Animal Planet or whatever this may be? But again, it
Hmm.
just goes back to consumers do want a little bit of choice to find something that's going to best fit their lifestyles.
And there actually have been studies around this. This is something that, Zach, I think we talked about when we did our handbook on the psychology of pricing episode. But bundling does make sense if the services are complementary. So something like a parental control service that's bundled with internet in a family style plan, that's actually something that people are willing to pay for and potentially even willing to pay more money for than if they were to buy it individually a la carte.
And on that
Where
note, Gabe, if we think about the acquisition case, Xbox Cloud Gaming as an introductory offer on your gamer plan, those two things
exactly,
go hand in hand.
yes, versus a landline phone and internet. Those two things, they're almost competing products in a way.
I
If you think about it,
I just remembered this. One of my best friends, they moved and they signed up for service, and the service came with the free landline phone. And I thought that
like
was
the
the funniest
actual
thing.
phone.
Yes, like
Oh, that's hysterical.
you could actually dial his number and this thing rings. And I thought it was the
Uh,
funniest thing, but I should ask him how many times he's actually used that free phone and whether or not post introductory period that phone is still free.
yes, exactly. Yeah, it's a great point, right? And oftentimes you do see that, or we see situations too where the regulatory environment in broadband is sometimes very weird, especially for rural providers. And so what you and I see from time to time is if you want the best price on internet, you also have to take the phone line, which is something that again people really don't like, especially when they feel like they're forced to take it. Now there are ways around this. I don't need to get into all the intricate details here. It's boring, and I don't know that anybody cares. But point being, if you have these not like for like services, or again, almost competitive services, people aren't going to want to put them together. If you have complementary services that complement the broadband service that you're selling to your customer, protecting them while they're online, protecting their kids while they're online, making sure that they can, see what's going on their network, all those sorts of things. Those are complementary, and people will pay for those, and actually will be willing to pay more sometimes than if they were sold individually.
Gabe, that is the top 10 list. I do want to end on one thing. Speaking of, we've always done it this way, and kind of the history walkthrough today. It is September. In just a couple weeks, on September 30th, AOL will be shutting down their dial-up service. I don't know if we've talked about that yet, but I want to remind all of the listeners who are probably listening to this on dial-up several months late at this point, that since we've
Definitely
always done
not
it this
watching
way,
it on video, that's for sure.
Oh gosh,
Did you
I
ever
watched
have
a
an AOL account?
No, I actually have never used AOL. I don't want to say I don't know what it is, but I it's a website, and that's all I need to know at this
Oh
point.
my gosh,
And
man. It
dial-up
was so it
service.
came out when I was like probably like early teens. And they would send you the CD. I remember telling you this story, and you'd pop it into your computer, and then you could just chat with people. And the AOL chat rooms were just bonkers because anybody could be in there. They could say whoever they were. There was there was an acronym, which this is insane. This will just completely melt your brain. So it was ASL, age, sex, location. And
Is that
people
account
would
success
ask,
leader?
no, sadly, no, it was not. And people would like, you get super creepy people in there, like asking people that, and and this was the innocent days of the internet where you didn't realize that sharing that information was a bad idea. Just terrible, terrible ideas. And I'm sure awful conversations that happened in those AOL
It's funny.
chat rooms.
You mentioned it's a bad idea to share that information, and meanwhile, we're off, signing up for Facebook accounts and like giving these companies access to our entire iPhone photo library. It's like privacy has gone out the window. But
yeah,
no,
it was
never
a
used
simpler
AOL.
time, Zach.
I don't plan to, but I was going to mention, just wrapping up this. We've always done it this way. And it's funny to wrap up this way because now we're just talking about old technology. But I watched a video today, and it was some guy. He had a floppy disk, which is like one of those square cartridges. And
I love that you feel like you have to explain this.
I'm like cracking up on the phone. That's good. We're going to keep this in. Anyway, he had this floppy disk, and he was using it as a coaster, and he took a picture of it. And he went through the process of getting that picture of his bottle of Coke on this floppy disk onto the floppy disk. And he had to like get like a USB floppy disk drive reader thing where I don't know. This is beyond me. But anyway, he got the photo on there. He had to like compress it a bunch and reduce the size. But it's old technology.
Okay,
man.
So to wrap this up, though,
yeah, let's end this episode.
let's end this by wrapping this all up with a nice bow. What Zach just talked about there, and everything that we went through in this top 10 list today, is oftentimes the things that we talked about they were the selling tactics when floppy drives were available, when AOL was available. Like, it's one and the same. These things have been done in this industry the same way forever, because we just continue to fall back on this is the way that we've always done it. And this is what drives Zach and I crazy, and why we wanted to have this episode. And when it came up in the conversation in the last podcast episode we did, we were like, oh my gosh, we have to do this, because it is something that we still see every day with companies that are falling into these traps and, just killing value for their organizations because this is the way that it's always been done.
Gabe, did you catch the common theme throughout each of these 10? Because there was a common theme. I'd be interested to know if our listeners caught it as well. But each one of these had an impact to the customer experience. I would say each one of these is a negative touch point within that customer journey.
Yes. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
The
Almost
all-day
all
service
of these are
appointment, the hidden fees, the phone-only support, all of these translate into a poor customer experience.
Yep. Yeah. Mic drop, dude. I think that's a perfect way to end it.
You didn't want to end on the floppy disk, sir. But thank you, everyone, for tuning into Buffering. And if you enjoyed this episode and this discussion on floppy disks, don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast app and to share it with your friends and colleagues. And for more insights and updates, be sure to connect with Gabe and I on LinkedIn.